comedy sketch shows taught me, and that wasn't the full picture. I mean, it really wasn't. And
But now to have actors do it so that you can see actual scenes between all of them, between, of course, especially Jim and Tammy. It's so wonderful.
I went 7 and I did all 9 of you right here.
well, the documentary, I mean, they really introduced me to the incredible woman that she was, filled with compassion and love, and I was a bit shocked that I didn't really know the real Tammy, except for the drama and the media's, sensationalizing the story. And I thought, it began my journey of getting to know her and my journey of trying to get this film made and introduce her to a new generation of people.
I grew up in the North and in the South, so we had neighbors when I was a kid, that listened to television evangelists and stuff like that. And the country was, it's always been a bit divided, but not as divided as it is now. So I grew up in an atmosphere where I loved my neighbors, and we were all very good friends and tight, but they were just on the right, and I grew up in a liberal family. So to me, it was easier to enter the character Jerry Falwell with an open mind, even though when it comes right down to it, I don't agree with anything that he was for and anything he ever said. But, to service the script, you have to come in with an open mind, otherwise you're going to miss very specific things. So you try to keep an open mind and service the story the best you can.
Well, I'm going to reveal my age a little bit, but as a kid, it was hard to escape it. I grew up on a ranch out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, and we only had, I think, 4 stations back in the day. And at one point, as a child, anytime you turned on the TV, I was just trying to watch the cartoons or something, and you saw this story. As life goes, as a child, you think you know the story. You're kind of fed it, right? And indoctrinated with a certain legacy. And as an adult, once I got to read the script and I did my research and got to be a part of this film, I realized that it was really a whole other thing. And I think that's what makes this film and Jessica's portrayal as Tammy Faye so interesting. I think it's a little bit of an unknown story, and I think it's going to be restorative to, in a lot of ways, to Tammy Faye's legacy.
Well, I grew up with that on TV, and of course, when you're a kid and you have 3 channels, you know a lot about them, Jim and Tammy Faye. And it really looks to me like this is a winner. I don't go to a lot of premieres, but I went to Judy last year, and I have just the feeling about this one. So I wanted to see it.
That's right. Tammy Faye has been an inspiration to us for many years, and we actually went to PTL at the height of the scandal in the 80s, which carbon dates us to be kind of old, but we were always intrigued by her, and she seemed different than the public image, than the ridicule that was heaped upon her. And we got to know her when she was in Palm Springs, and we're like, why don't we make a film about her?
I'm so excited to see it again tonight. I've only seen it once at a screening, and I took a bunch of actor friends. I was working up in Toronto, and they kindly did a screening, and see it with a bunch of, there were about 10 of us, and everybody just came away agog, of course, at Jessica and Andrew, but it's called The Eyes of Tammy Faye for a reason.
Well, actually, I remember, I'm old enough to remember the original, all the footage of them, him going to jail, seeing her on TV. I remember seeing her on all like Nightline and Larry King. So I didn't know much about her. I feel like I kind of am like the rest of the world in that she kind of got grouped in with Jim. And so I think what I learned was an awful lot about what an empathetic, warm, caring person she was. She was very strong. She believed in how she looked. She wanted to look good. She wore it strong. She wore it proudly. So I think that she was very true to her authentic self. And I think that's what kind of allowed her to be so authentic with other people and to be so tolerant and accepting in a particularly tight world where there wasn't that necessarily that kind of tolerance and acceptance. And I think that she taught us that. And I think a little bit earlier in her time than maybe, you know, we were ready for as a community. So
you know what? I think it's because I love her so much. I really love what she stood for. I think in any day and age, we need it. This idea that she could take cruelty and transfer it to love. She understood that if someone was being cruel, it was because they had pain inside and they felt unacknowledged and unseen. And so she would always cross the line. I mean, we're living in a time right now where there's a lot of things slinged back and forth, and we're always upping the insults and upping the hurt, and you did this to me, so now I'm gonna do this to you. And she really was the example of turning the other cheek and saying, you know what? I'm going to give you love because I understand that you have pain and I want to know where that pain comes from. And it's something I think we can all learn from.
Exactly. She really humanizes Tammy Faye and makes her, compassionate and loving. That's the way I met the real Tammy Faye when I was interviewed by her in 1985. She was as supportive and loving and compassionate as she could be.
I think we all had a sense of her just through popular culture, but nowhere near the deep dive we did once we started developing this.
Yeah, I just remember she and Jim being on the cover of Newsweek in my house and being obsessed and really intrigued.
I mean, I'd seen the documentary, so you kind of learn all that from that. And I mean, I sort of suspected that about her. Yeah, I knew the Bakers from when the scandal broke. I was an adolescent during that, but then she kind of went on and she had her show with Jim J. Bullock, and she was on The Surreal Life. So I had a sense of that. But I think it's really exciting to tell a story about somebody that maybe we could look at in a different way.
No, the only thing I knew of her was what comedy sketch shows taught me, and that wasn't the full picture. I mean, it really wasn't. And I feel like oftentimes in our history we've done a disservice to women, and it's time we need to reevaluate it. We look at Monica Lewinsky and Marcia Cross and all these stories that are coming out where we're going, wait a minute, or even Britney Spears. We're talking about all these stories even now. It's how have we commodified? How have we judged? How have we made women into commodities and for us to devour and then throw away and not actually look at their talents and their skills and what they actually accomplish in their lives? Why did we focus so much on how much mascara Tammy wore and not actually how she loved people and healed people? So it's about time we change that.
Jessica Chastain is Tammy Faye. It was watching the film was she just is. It's chilling. I got chills. You forgot you were watching an actress. You were watching Tammy Faye. She channels Tammy Faye.
Jessica said that there's several gals now who got a bum rap in the press who are sort of getting a little bit of their comeuppance now. And I'm just so respect Jessica for doing that for Tammy. I mean, the documentary did it, but now to have actors do it so that you can see actual scenes between all of them, between, of course, especially Jim and Tammy. It's so wonderful.
I mean, for me, that was the reason I was so excited to be involved in the project, was that it was a humanistic view of Tammy Faye and not a caricature.
Exactly.
And she just dove so deep into all archival footage, YouTube's footage from the documentary, so it was constantly around us, singing, the accent, all of it. We were immersed.
I think that there's a misconception of who Tammy Faye is, and so much of it is actually based on the way she looks. And so I think the real takeaway is don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, I think that's a big part of what Tammy Faye preaches, and so I'm hoping a lot of people get to watch the movie.
I want them to love her like I do. I mean, I want them to maybe just even, preparing for the role, it taught me a lot. And I hope this will happen. Social media can be a negative place. And there was one moment where I was getting, attacked by someone who was being quite mean to me. And I was like, where is this coming from? And I clicked on the platform and I started to get to know the person. And I really, and I saw some sadness and some difficult things that they were going through in their lives. And I thought, this is where it comes from. So I wondered, I hope that you watch a film like this and you understand that you can reach across and try to heal someone. I hope it, like anyone who feels unloved and unseen and unworthy will see the film and know that they are absolutely deserving of God's grace. Of grace. It doesn't even have to be God's grace. It could be whatever you call it, of grace.
Well, I think what she does is that she gives the character humility. And that's something that people aren't used to. We only remember Tammy Faye when they've made fun of her on the front of the newspaper or on SNL, you know, but there's much more to that woman than that, you know. And Jessica brings all of that humility to the character and to the story.
I hope that they find that they realize that Tammy Faye was a real human being with real feelings, and that she was a loving, compassionate human being who actually reached out to the gay and lesbian community. She wanted to be the first to interview a gay man with AIDS, and they found me, and I was happy to go on the show to talk to her. And that was the beginning of her outreach to gay and lesbian people and the LGBTQ population. And she became a very popular figure among LGBTQ people.
You know, she's had this project in development for a long time, and I just think it's one of those things where that the character, you live with the character, and then it's just sort of inside you, and then you start adding in the elements like the makeup and the wardrobe and the wig and all of it, and then it just kind of comes out of you. And I feel like that's what she did. She worked really hard, she prepared, so that when all the elements finally came together, it just poured out of her.
I just think it's going to be a good film. I don't know about the messaging until I see the film, but I look forward to seeing it, and I think she's one of the finest actresses working.
You know, again, I wasn't there. I don't know all the facts, but I do know from the stories I've heard that she, more than maybe anybody that was involved in this, lived the word that most people were preaching, apparently. But she embraced all of God's children, and she did it with empathy, and she did it with courage. And she helped a lot of people that were really suffering in the 80s and were being ostracized, and nobody was telling their story, and it was fear-based. And you know, we've seen this sort of thing before. It kind of repeats itself, and it really does take a bit of a brave soul and a brave voice to reach out and give the voiceless a voice.
Doing a scripted film based on such a loud character who many people would perceive as camp, but grounding it in reality was surprising to me. So I guess I took surprise away more than anything else. And of course, Jessica's performance, it's just gobsmacking. I mean, it really is tremendous.
Well, for one thing, I've never done an accent from anybody from International Falls, Minnesota, and I still haven't. I did the best I could. But I grew up in the South where people were profoundly religious, and just that horrible thing of this woman. I love that Tammy was so protective of her mother, and that because of this divorce, she was always having to go above and beyond to gain the love and respect of her church and her community because she had divorced, and I think it scarred her, and it made her mistrustful of people. And meanwhile, she had 8 children with a privy in the backyard in the coldest place on earth. She was made of strong stuff, Tammy's mama.
I did just the research, and I had to get he had a particular way of, he had a Virginian accent, but he had a very particular accent. He over-enunciated words, and so I had to get his posture down and stuff like that, the usual kind of stuff. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's really fun because you get to do a lot of work, and then you get to, you know, bring them alive, or your version of that person alive. And I was in such good company with Jessica and Andrew. I mean, the scenes, all of our scenes were together, and when you work with 2 actors like that, it makes it so easy.
We did a lot of research, and we tried to, if there was a specific piece of the storyline we tried to, like if there was a bit of footage, we tried to match that. And I think there was a lot of caricature looks done in the comedic world or in, you know, the late night sort of shows. And I think that we never saw images of her like that. She never had mascara running down her face. She really was super well put together. And so I think that was the key. And it is a fine line. It's a large look, but it is her look. And as long as we pushed to where that look was and didn't go over top, then I feel like we honored her and didn't cross that line.
I loved what Randy Havens did with me. I thought, you know, it's kind of surreal to see somebody saying the actual words you said and playing you on screen, but he did a wonderful job, I thought. She decided to do the film when she saw my interview with Tammy Faye, and that she used my interview with Tammy Faye as her prep work every day for filming. She would get into character by watching the interview and talking along with Tammy Faye as she talked to me. So, wow, quite something.
Yeah, I think it's a message of openness and acceptance and positivity that we really want to be sending out into the world.
And a little less judgment.
Saudi, I love you. Just complete welcoming of all people, no matter what. We should always be open and honest in life.
I think it's her message of love and acceptance, that her response to people being negative towards her was not to be negative back to them, but to love them. And that's very brave to do it that way. We're not, you know, we should all be, you know, if we could only all be like that. And so that's the inspiration that I take from her.
Just a blast. As soon as I walked into set straight from tour, and you know, it was a little bit overwhelming, or it could be, but Jessica was so gracious, and she's just such a lovely spirit. She's a great human being, and it just was fun. It felt like playing, and I think that's, for me, that's the appeal in acting, and it's the kind of roles and the kind of sets that I want to be on, working with people that have a really strong vision, and at the same time really provide an amazing creative environment. I just felt really safe, I guess, and yeah, it was kind of a blur, because it's also like stepping into the ring and trying to play, you know, Michael Jordan 101, being in a scene with Jessica and with Andrew, and
it would just be wonderful in this incredibly divided country that we're in if we could all just be a little more compassionate towards one another and do what Tammy did, which was to put herself in other people's shoes and try not to judge.
Originally, the process when we were doing the initial work and the initial testing, the prosthetics was done by a separate team. We all worked together. The trailers were side by side. The original prosthetics did take longer because you're trying to find your way with them, and we had different. We crossed 3 decades of looks, so the pieces increased in how many we applied, and the makeup also increased. So in those early years, it was a little bit softer, and then it progressed. So we had bigger looks. But eventually, we got down, I would say, with makeup, hair, prosthetics, everything, we got down in that 4.5 hour range, which is still a lot. But I think that was a big difference between those initial, 7 hours of work.
I want to try to just make a movie that exists both as a great movie and a great piece of entertainment, but also that hopefully honors the true story at the same time.